Capital and Clarity Live. Our EQ architect, Mike, should be jumping on. He may not be able to make it tonight. That's okay. Tonight is probably going to be a little bit more casual, a little bit shorter than an hour. I know it's a long weekend, a holiday weekend. So happy Memorial Day to everyone who is celebrating. I'm going to take a quick second and just make sure the streams are performing as they're supposed to across all of our platforms. So this is a weekly cross-platform live show where typically I'm joined by Mike Dulcio, who is our EQ architect. And when he jumps in, I will let you guys know. With that being said, it does look like all of our streams are up and running. So awesome. Again, guys, I do encourage you to use the chat option. So tonight, when Mike joins, we might take a little bit of a different direction. But tonight, I want to hone in on the 10 stages of business ownership. And I want to introduce a diagnostic tool that I've built for business owners in Southwest Florida, and it's applicable across the nation, across the globe. I encourage you guys to check this out. It's going to give you a ton of value. It's going to tell you exactly where you are in your business, even if you haven't started. And it's going to tell you exactly what you need to do to get to the next step to reach your business goals. And so without further ado, I just want to take a moment. I'm actually going to share my screen this evening. And this is at stage.seankshahkarami.com. I will drop the links for everyone who wants to jump in and use this tool. It only takes like 2 to 3 minutes, completely free, nothing weird with your data, anything like that. It's going to give you a powerful roadmap to help you transform your business to get from just thinking about an idea all the way towards exit planning, succession, and legacy. Guys, I built this tool not from theory, but from actual experience. I've started 5 businesses total. 3 have been successful. 1 was a learning experience, and I'm on my 5th, which is off to a great start. So this is not just textbook theory. I didn't just graduate from business school and put this together. These lessons, these unlocks were hard earned, and I just want to share them with all of you. And so what this tool does is you'll go to stage.seankshahkarami.com. But first, real quick, if you have not subscribed, and specifically subscribed to the YouTube channel and to our Substack, would you please take a moment and hit the subscribe button? Guys, it helps me more than you can possibly know. I'm really putting intentional effort in right now to growing the YouTube, and it provides me the value back so that I can keep growing and expanding and increasing this channel. I'm working on some amazing guests. I think some of you have already seen some of the amazing guests who have been coming on. If you haven't gone back and watched some of the business owner interviews, guys, those are tremendous. I'm not just saying this. I get a lot of really good feedback, and the feedback that I'm getting is that these videos, these interviews are providing actual practical, helpful, valuable insight that other business operators I know are actually putting into action and seeing results very quickly. So please subscribe and go back and watch some of those business owner interviews. So once you get to this page, stage.seankshahkarami.com, all you do is hit start the assessment. It's going to ask just a couple questions about your business. So what type of business? So I'll do this for real. I'm kind of in the consulting space. My newest business, it's under a year. I do have paying customers, so I'm going to click that. I've committed, so I'm going to click that. I show up consistently, so I'm going to click that one. Do I have repeatable proof? Yes, I've proven I can repeat. With the revenue, no. Right now, my business is in the infancy stage. So if it wasn't for me hustling, my revenue would mostly stop. So I'm going to be honest right there. Have I delegated? I have delegated tasks, but I'm still in the stage where I'm taking ownership over every decision. Um, are my systems? I'm not totally quite scaled, so I'm in this middle area here, managing. No, honestly, my business right now could not run 90 days without me. Do I have optionality? Not really. Have I built succession so the business could continue without me? I've started thinking about it, right? Planning for the future. So I will type in my information there, show my result. And so it tells me clearly what stage my business is in, breaking through to sustainability. So this is a very common stage that I meet a lot of business owners are here. It means that you actually have a business. You went all in, you're showing up consistently, even when things get hard, you continue to show up. And the core lesson is that revenue is awesome, but it's not always revenue does not equal sustainability. The whole the whole thing that separates the factor that separates a business into a business that creates enterprise value and scale is a predictable model so that you can consistently predict your revenues and forecast into the future. And that takes systems, scales, and delegation. So, my number one mistake to avoid right now is just celebrating the revenue and ignoring all the other important KPIs or key performance indicators, margin, retention, and how many of the decisions that I own, because until I delegate, I can't really scale and grow easily, right? And so it says, my next move is to identify my most profitable, repeatable offer and focus on that one thing. And then my next stage is where I begin delegating more, which I'm working on so that I can scale, right? And what's really neat, guys, is this is helpful as like a quick diagnostic tool to tell you where you are, where you want to go, and how to get there. But then you can hit this access the full playbook and you can download this. This is everything in a 16-page PDF. I don't want to go through all 16 pages, so I will just show you the one pager. And here are the 10 stages. Like I said, this is experience, not just theory. So stage number one, which next week I want to dive deeper into stage number one. And then each week we'll progress through these 10 stages with practical insights, advice, and when Mike is back, have his insights onto the emotional intelligence and how that wraps in to getting each stage, because each stage requires an identity shift, right? And I'm working on that myself. Maybe you've heard the term, what got you here? Oh, Mike's joining us. I'm going to let him in. I'll finish this call, and then Coach Mike can help us get to the next level. So each stage of business growth needs an identity shift. And so before you should just jump in, there's fundamentals. There's an idea. And then you make a jump into the business. Typically, when you make that jump, you quickly transition into stage three, which is you have a lot of motivation at first, but then reality may hit you in the face and that motivation dips. And
Yes.
we go through a valley period where things get hard and we can't just rely on the extrinsic motivation. And this is the valley, this is the stage where a lot of people quit. But if you can push through and make it through the valley, you hit the breakthrough to revenue sustainability. And that's also, I would say, another stage where a lot of entrepreneurs, founders, business owners get stuck because the biggest identity shift then comes between stage 5 and 6, where you have to start delegating and giving up control to scale your business. Once that happens, you're going to go into stage 7. You're always going to have growing pains. How do you manage that growth? And then a lot of my clients are in these last 4 stages, 7, 8, 9, and 10, where we start thinking about how do we replace yourself, plan the exit, and set up your succession, your exit plan, and your legacy. So, anyways, wanted to show you that tool. Stage.SeanKShahkarami.com gives you the entire playbook. The tool will tell you exactly where you are and what to do to get where you need to be. Without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen at this point. And Mike, man, thanks so much for jumping on. I know it's a holiday.
Absolutely, Sean. Absolutely. Thank you for. It's always a pleasure to be on here with you. Yeah, it is a holiday. We had a lot of things going on today, but this is one of those things that I feel like is very necessary for us to be on because of the value that's contained in the different topics being shared. And I just love what you were sharing earlier about the different stages because a lot of it speaks towards the principles that we find in the 4 levels of value, especially when discussing about what we call in my world, in the world of EQ, emotional intelligence, and how that translates into business and family and the nervous system. These peaks and valleys, mountaintops, and more challenging moments as we would regard to as peaks. Um, that's where we would say, and Sean, I know you know this, everything that is happening is either happening for you, is happening to you, is happening for you. So when you are in those stages of pruning or purging or hardship, or whatever the case is, this is why I say the growth is still happening, but it's happening gravitropically. And what I mean there is this is the growth that people don't see. This is the growth that happens beneath the dirt. This is where the roots are starting to plant further deeper into the ground and extend. These are the character adjustments that are taking place. These are some of the relationships that are having to be challenged or cut off even for the sake of growth as a part of the pruning. This isn't the it's not pretty. It's not pretty. These aren't the things people post about, but this level of growth is so necessary because it's building on integrity and maturation and development. When we grow gravitropically, which is deeper into the ground, this is where the seed begins to germinate and it starts to burst out, and that needs to happen, and it won't happen unless it's under pressure. And that pressure usually happens in the dark spaces. And the pressure wasn't never necessarily meant to break to destroy, but rather break to expose, reveal, and then become. And it's in that becoming, that's what we and by no means necessary. I am not a botanist, but however, the principle lies true where it's in the breaking of the seed and the germination process. That's when it starts to fight through the soil and aim upwards, and it starts to grow phototropically. And that's where we're moving from these valley spaces and we're now going into the peak spaces. We're growing out of that. And I think the principles of the laws of value, implementation, unification or delegation, communication and imagination, There's a lot of work that's done on the base level since, which coincides with the growth gravitropically. But as we begin to rise up, and rising up might be knowledge, education, mentorship, coaching, expansion of thought. Um, as we start to gain new accesses and new knowledge, it starts to expedite the growth. And not only does that growth expedite, let's say if it's a tree that's coming out of the ground, when it goes past the plant phase and it's the roots are there, it has a bark, and the tree is developing. Now we go into compounding because an apple tree doesn't carry 3 apples. It doesn't carry 10 apples. This is where multiplication starts to show up, and I think that speaks so true to what you were sharing. Even though I know I came in on halfway through what you were going on, but I'm sure principally we'll find a lot of things relative to where compound interest or compound growth is starting to happen in the state of, and that can happen financially, that can happen through networking and connections, that can happen through the giftings that we realize that that's within us. And these things start to spread out and grow out, and new connections start to happen, or new opportunities are created, therefore, from that version of growth. So, I love what you're sharing with the steps. I love the system and the framework that you have here. And I'm glad I was able to climb in and jump in, even while at it. This is just like, listen, when life throws you lemon, you got to make lemonade. And that's what we're about over here.
Exactly. I think so. What I was going through was the diagnostic tool that I put together that can help people transform their business just by giving them the information, the knowledge to start moving into understanding what stage they're in, where they're spending most of their time in terms of the 4 levels of value, and giving them a roadmap for their next unlock into their next stage. And I was talking about how this was built not as textbook theory, but as something I've experienced after starting. I'm on my 5th business, 3 successful, one a learning experience, and about a year into my 5th one now. And how each stage takes a identity shift. But what's interesting, Mike, is I think there's really 3 main places where the identity shift is more prevalent. And the first one is just in stage 1. And we can spend a little bit more time, I think, next week starting on stage 1. And that's just developing an idea and making the jump and learning the fundamentals before you've even started the business. Just having the vision, having the idea, and deciding to make that jump. But then typically what happens is over the course of, I would say on average, the first 3 months to a year, you you jump in with a lot of excitement, a lot of vigor, a lot of energy, a lot of extrinsic motivation, and that wears off at some point. For some people, it's 3 months. Some people, it's 6 months. But
Right?
typically, that wears off, and then there's a valley period. And I would say, the statistics, say that, only like, I think it's like only 20% of businesses make it past year 1. It's not a big percentage. It's because a lot of
Right?
people quit in that valley, right? But if you can make the identity shift from the valley to the breakthrough, that's when the revenue starts to become a little bit easier, and the business starts to grow. But that's when the business is just you for the most part. And after some time, some people get stuck, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. There's 2 types of businesses, in my opinion. There's a lifestyle business, and that's really a business that makes it to the 5th stage. And not a bad thing, but a business owner decides, okay, hey, this is good. This business is affording me the lifestyle I want. I'm just I'm just going to keep this going for the next however many years it takes to, you know, accumulate enough capital, accumulate enough assets where I can retire. But that's because the next level is completely different from the first five stages. And
Right.
the next level is when you get into unifying, delegating, scaling, where processes and people and communication are the most important part. And it's the ability to let go of controlling everything and trusting the people and processes that you put in place to delegate and scale. Um,
Absolutely.
and so where that comes in with maybe you on the call now is what are the keys? Not I can lay out some of the business keys, but what are the keys for people that they need to work on or do to make those identity shifts?
Yeah, no, great question. I'm going to speak towards what you started with the person that has an idea for a business, or they're starting off with a lot of passion and ambition, or whatever the case is, and they may tend to find burnout. I said that usually happens when someone is, well, to most people, anyone starting off in a new business or a new business idea or concept, if it's based on excuse me, passion alone, I would say that it has a quicker rate to burn out. If it's based on passion alone without understanding systems, strategy, scaling, and knowing what the market needs, what the market desires, and how they can add value to that market. So I say passion in and of itself is a great thing to have, but if you're going in with passion only, that's not going to be enough to sustain it, because there is an aspect of numbers, marketing, people, operations, and logistics. There is a certain level of knowledge that has to be attained experientially, whether it's by them or by whoever they're placing themselves around. Now, what's huge with this, and gaining momentum and sustaining business, as there is growth in the different levels, like you were mentioning, there is a level of death that has to occur
Mm,
in the person that is growing, especially in the different levels, because who you are that's gotten you to the place that you've gotten in the business is not going to be the same person that is going to help you scale towards a greater business, or a new set point in capital, or whatever the case is. There's a certain level of maturation, understanding, that has to develop, that is going to cause the person to almost, not almost, to literally shed off who they were before. There are certain distractions, or relationships, or patterns that will need to scale off, shed or die off, in order for that person to rise, to get towards whatever goals they've set for themselves. And I find that the higher the goal, or the more prominent the position or the rising is, the greater the sacrifice.
mm,
There's always there's always going to be something to sacrifice on the lower end in order to gain access on the higher end. And this speaks a lot towards um, the level of not only responsibility that someone is growing into, but the willingness to make bigger and better decisions. Because like the word says, you can't pour new wine in the old wineskins.
Hmm.
And the principle of that is if I'm doing something new or better or greater, whatever was around me before may not necessarily have the capacity to contain that. It may actually be keeping me down.
So again, not speaking from theory, speaking from experience, I've been through every stage up to 5 and into 6. In beginning into scaling and delegating myself, and I've been through those stages. Yeah, five. Every business made it into basically the top of stage 5, getting into stage 6, and my last business, I swung for the fences. I had a vision of creating a enterprise value company that I believed could be a 8 to 9 figure exit, um, and some of the personal things that happened at the same time of me starting that business. There was no coincidence. There were a lot of relationships I had to leave behind. Not even just
Right.
relationships. There was an entire geography that I ended up leaving behind. And um, not to get into any type of over melancholy of the past, or for me, I'm happy to share my story when it's the right time, but it's really not about the story. The stories are just the things that we tell ourselves, and it's those stories that lead to patterns, and it's those stories that we have to shed so that our patterns can change. And you mentioned compounding, whether it is business, financial, relational, spiritual. Compounding is not something that you normally see, especially at first. Compounding starts small and slow, but it becomes a snowball effect. And you don't realize the compounding, you don't realize the growth, you don't realize the shedding of the old stories until some time has passed. And then you look back and you're like, oh, wow, look how far I've come. And I guess all that to say
You're absolutely
is
right.
when you're going through these stages, one of the reasons why I built this diagnostic tool, again, I'm going to go ahead and drop that in the chat over here, stage.shakarami.com, is a lot of times you don't really know what stage you're in until you do some reflection.
And and that's exactly where we in a lot of my practice we've helped to expedite that process and to bring clarity in that process because self-awareness is so underrated. It's so necessary, um, especially as we're going through different stages in life and different transitions, to be aware of not only where we are, but some of the things that are holding us back that we're not even aware of. And this is what I call the blind spots, because all it could really take is just 1/4 inch turn to completely create some form of a breakthrough in understanding because of the shift in perspective. Um, like you were just saying, there are many stories that we've carried over from our past lives and experiences, and we may have done great work to recreate our narrative, but until we begin to deal with some of these things that has affected us on a subconscious level, intrinsically, the amount of work that we would have done and development that we would have done for ourselves, very good. And it could take us, but only so far. But there may be some subconscious things that we are still, that may be controlling the way we even view things, whether it's from a defensive perspective, whether it's from a perspective of, well, I know when good things start to happen, the shoe's bound to fall. I know something negative is bound to happen. These kind of stories in our subconscious mind, if we aren't able to unpack and find clarity to where these stories either began or to realize that these things are falsehoods, they may naturally create something that we call either self-sabotage, or it'll show up again because we might have subconsciously created these things to happen. So having another being able to sit down with clients and offer, expedite the process and offering clarity and open awareness and understanding. When those unlocks happen, I have the benefit of seeing people not only release the weight that was on their shoulders, in their heart, in their minds, but I also get the benefit of seeing them. It's almost like seeing light for the first time, or drinking a fresh, cold glass of water for the first time. It's like I had no idea this was all around me this whole time. I had no idea these kind of opportunities were presenting themselves, or that I was the one sabotaging these things because of how I once believed. So, yes, it's very necessary to be able to connect with people, or systems, or frameworks that helps us to unlock certain blind spots so that we are able to elevate and allow that to take a snowball effect into the good that comes behind that rather than the negative.
And I think, I can share a quick example. This actually just happened the other day. So I grew up, and you know, for better or worse, there are definitely some things that it drove me. But part of releasing my story was I grew up and I was called lazy all the time. Didn't matter what I did, straight A's, multiple jobs, extracurriculars, sports, accolades, achievements, scholarships, whatever the case was. I got called lazy almost on a daily basis, and so um, got called some other things growing up that had to do with my weight. And so I've struggled with my weight my entire life. I've been thin, I've been fit, and it's always come back on during seasons of extreme stress. And I found myself in a pattern of wanting to get fit again. And what normally would happen was I would um, work out to the point where I'd be so sore I could barely walk the next day. And that's not helpful, right? You can go work out really hard with such intensity, but if I can't go back to the gym the next day or the day after because my body's so sore, um, I'm defeating the purpose. And so I'm driving to this workout class that I really like. It's called Spinga. And if you're in Naples, or if you're somewhere where Spinga is close by, I highly recommend it. It's a great workout. And I told myself, hey, like, push yourself, but don't go above 90%. The whole idea is that I can go do this again tomorrow. Don't go 120% because you think you're lazy and make yourself sick or so sore that you can't go back. And I had this like perception shift, this breakthrough where I was kind of like, man, like, wake up early. I don't really want to go. I have to do this. And on my way, I was like, wait, this is self-care. As long
Right.
as as long as I go through the exercise in a way that is sustainable so I can show back up the next day, this is no different than meditating. This is taking care of myself. This is a form of self-compassion. This is a form of self-care, right? And so it was a same thing I've always done, but taking a different perspective, and I was able to shift into a more sustainable version of myself so that I can show back up the next day.
100%, brother.
And I bring that up because some of the early stages and even mid stages of business ownership are very similar, right? And I think this is where you really help people, Mike, on the clarity and making sure people don't burn out. I always want an answer, right? Like, and I can get so hyper focused, I can over function easily. But many things in business, there's really no conclusion, right? Like, put it to you this way: the live show, right? I could obsess over this live show, and then afterwards I could stay up 2 to 3 hours and make sure every thumbnail, every description, every post is perfect, and all that stuff is important, but it's never really finished. It's just going to repeat itself next week, right? Or I can understand my boundaries, I can understand my own limitations as a human, and say, hey, tonight we're going to do this live stream. Tomorrow I have scheduled time where I'm going to do the posting and the post production. And I have a content calendar. And I bring that up because in the early stages of business, a lot of times people push themselves to get to some end or some conclusion of a task or an objective or a goal. And then they get there or realize they don't they're going to have to go to sleep and pick it back up the next day, but they don't get there in a way that's sustainable. And that's where you get burned out really easily.
Well, you said the key word earlier, and that's in having boundaries. If a person doesn't have what is freedom is not freedom unless you understand the boundaries within it. If you don't understand the boundaries within the freedom that we are living in, one, not only will we not appreciate the freedom, two, that will always lead to crash, burnout, sabotage, or death in some kind of way. Um, is and this is why executive functioning plays a huge role in being effective in the things that we're called to steward or manage. Um, if I'm unable to manage myself, how can I manage an effective business? Because the business would only be an extension of me. And the more refined and balanced I'm able to become, whether it's through trial and error, through coaching and consulting, through planning and scheduling, whatever the case is, whatever the method is, I can be more um, effective and advantageous to what I put my hand to. Like I love the story that you shared with working out. That's so true. It's very true. Um, a lot of us, a lot of people in working out, a professional would tell you, hey, we got avoid all extremes. Don't start so heavy because there's a old Asian proverb that says the star that brightens the star that shines the brightest burns out the fastest. So in going so heavy in working out, especially if we haven't worked out for some time, what are we likely to do? One, the results are not going to happen faster. What's going to happen faster is burnout, pain, struggle, and that's going to take an effect on the ability to recover. Because if we went too hard on the first 2 days, now we can't get up for the next 3, 4, 5 days. Rather than pacing ourselves and building a momentum into the workout. So I think it's imperative to understand, to get a clear picture of what the present looks like and what the future goals are, and then to create some kind of a framework in how to attain it successfully. But usually, instead of trying to create that framework, it's often better that we find these success systems that are already working, that we can model.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when we're able to model those success systems, we'll see where proper boundaries are set in place to keep us from over functioning, doing too much, or to becoming too lackadaisical, too lazy, or whatever the case is. And because anybody who does too much, the reason that works against us is because if we're over functioning, we're teaching the people around us to under function,
Right.
to do less.
And
And
that's a key
and
leadership lesson.
right, right. And it's imperative, it's very healthy for us where we get to understand that yes, there are things that we want to get done, and there are things that needs to get done. Let's focus on the needs and the necessities and make sure those things are in order first, and use that extra time accordingly,
Yep.
because that's where we will find less friction, more momentum, and honestly being able to not only have boundaries, but to acknowledge the small wins in
Yes.
between the steps. It helps incredibly to acknowledge the small wins, because that's like pouring fuel into your operation: emotional fuel, intellectual fuel, physical fuel, because you're celebrating what you've done. And it's like, and it's not to stop there, but it's to recognize the accomplishment as a show to say, look, I did it. I got it done. This is good. Now let's move towards the next step. But I don't, and this is not a slight for those of us who struggle to acknowledge ourselves, because again, these are the little unlocks or the blind spots that, if we're not privy to, can work against us. Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I was going to say, what I think is interesting about boundaries is we need to put some of the practical insights that I can give from a business and from a finance perspective is for those of you who may not have a business, just from a financial perspective, we need to put boundaries around our money, right? Like that's why Dave Ramsey is so popular. And I'm not a big Dave Ramsey fan. I agree with a lot of what he says, but I don't agree with all of it. And I understand that he's really speaking to a specific group of people. But his envelope system was so successful because each envelope, you put cash in there, which you can just use a bank account. You can have a separate bank account for everything if you want a more modern day version. But everything was organized and structured, and each envelope was a boundary unto itself. Each
Absolutely.
And from a business perspective, we have to do that with our time. So one of the more challenging things that I go through on a day in and day out basis is until you reach a certain stage, and then it's probably still going to repeat itself at some point, is these four levers of value from implementation, which just basically means you are kind of doing all the work and implementing, to unification, which is unifying systems and processes and beginning to unify people around these processes, so that you can get into communication, so that you can actually delegate, up into the point of imagination where you're basically just the strategic visionary, called CEO, of the business. Is it's a spectrum, and for most people we have to move through those four, at least three, if not all four of those levels on a day in and day out basis. And so I also find interesting that, going back to the spectrum or the cycle, is before you start the business, you have a vision, which comes from imagination, which means that you're operating in the imagination realm of value. Then you start a business. Typically, your resources, typically resources are allocated, and you then have to move into implementation, and then you move back up into imagination. So it's kind of a spectrum where you're moving in and out. And on a day in and day out basis, where I struggle and I see a lot of other people struggle, is basically setting boundaries around their time blocks and being able to successfully switch tasks, but also move through that spectrum of the four levels of value. And so, some things that have helped me is creating an ideal calendar, time blocking for specific things. There's specific time blocks where I know I'm going to be calling people, I know I'm going to be emailing, I know I'm going to be checking social media inboxes, whatever. So that's like time for implementation. But I also try to start my day in more prayer, meditation, imagination. So I time block that out. And then there's going to be times during the day where I need to communicate effectively. And then there's going to be times of the day where I need to work on the business, which is in the unification. How am I going to create processes and begin unifying these processes together so that I can outwardly scale? And it's a small step, like you said, compounds, little actions to try to take one step forward each day. But I think where a lot of people get lost is, you have to know when you're at your best. And what do I mean by that? I know that if I don't wake up early and work out, it's not going to get done. I have two kids. When I was a teenager, I loved to go to the gym late at night, but it's just not going to happen, right? So I have to know that about myself. I also know my most creative time is mid morning to early afternoon. By mid to late afternoon, I'm spent. I'm fried. I don't need to be taking client meetings. I don't need to be working on um, important high level things. By the end of afternoon, or by 2 or 3 o'clock, I need to be answering emails for the most part, and that's it. Right? And so you have to know yourself. Not everyone's like me. Some people may do their best work late afternoon. Figure that out for yourself, but you have to time block and protect your calendar with boundaries on yourself, so that you can actually be successful.
Well, Sean, you covered a lot of great points here, and absolutely knowing who you are and how you perform at different times of the day um, gives anyone a great advantage in their level of which coincides with self awareness. It gives people a great advantage in them being their most productive self at all those throughout the whole day. Knowing when your high points are and where your low points are so that we could just adjust accordingly around it is absolutely phenomenal. One thing with you mentioned some great things about the four levels of value. Yes, these things do work through us simultaneously throughout the day. Um, but a quick snapshot, a quick a reminder in speaking of those levels of value is understanding where the person is with regard to their business or their job, understanding the place that you're living in will help to better speak towards the reality of whether you're in implementation, whether implementation is ruling your life, whether unification delegation is ruling it, communication or imagination, and then being able to understand the primary value that's ruling your life. When we are able to see that, then we can better facilitate in the places and spaces to where we would want to elevate um, and those levels of value. And if anyone is hearing this for the first time, again, we share level one is implementation, which is the primary function of that one is just execute. Is that's very results driven. Execute hands on, very results driven. And the next one is unification, which kind of coincides with delegation, and that's where we use people to multiply the task or to scale. So there's a little less work on the hands-on, but you're now managing people or delegating tasks. So you're still very involved, but you're just more so managing it. And the third level, which is communication, this is more of influence when you're using your speaking skills, your selling skills, or you're using that influence, or it's a stronger role of leadership to where it's less hands on and it's more so influence and speak and speech that creates the movements or the revenue or the influence. And then obviously, like Sean stated, imagination, which is kind of like the CEO space. That's the creator space. This is the thinking box. This is more legacy driven. This is seeing long term and understanding these levels of value. When we're able to see where we are, the truth of it is the ones that work the hardest and makes the least, just frankly, is in the level implementation scale. And that doesn't have to be true just financially. This could speak to any and every area of our lives. And but there are benefits to all of it as well. So if we're scaling up in business, and if this is new for anyone hearing this, implementation really just lives in skill, labor, productivity, and hands-on. It's can you execute? And obviously, there are funds distributed there, but usually working the most, making the least.
You're trading time
And
for money in the
exactly,
implementation stage.
exactly, exchanging time for money, 100%. Similar thing with delegation, just not as much hands on, but can you multiply through people? This is the people asking, how do I do more? Or who can do this better, faster, or together? This is where unification comes in because there's a system of alignment and transfer. This is where you're developing teams, partnerships, and learning to create leverage.
And let's
So
just give
still
a quick example. So I talked earlier. So if you're watching, please subscribe to this channel because in the next few weeks, I'd like to get to the point where I can unify some people to help me do the editing here so that I can
very
just
good.
be the visionary behind the channel and do the creative work, working with Mike and interviewing business owners. And then I can buy some of my time back so I can grow the channel and provide even more value for all of you by getting some help on the editing and the pre and the post production. So just to give a real world example, Mike,
Right.
that would be, this small YouTube channel moving into the unification.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're absolutely right because now you're going into hiring and what's good about that is this is where people start to build a business and not only build a business but hopefully building a business larger than yourselves through joint ventures and SOPs and automation or what have you. These are the things that lives in unification and delegation. And then now, Sean doing that exceptionally well with the people that are coming on, that would naturally boost him or elevate into communication, which is what's happening right now. And that's the influence that's being shared. That's the leadership level. And this is where we have to understand communication is not just talking, but in Sean's world and in my world, communication is a transfer of clarity, a transfer of belief and vision and emotional certainty. So these kind of things in communication level, this is where you create alignment, you inspire movement, and you help to resolve conflict and to lead culture or even to sell ideas in this space. And in my space, which is EQ, it's not just emotional intelligence for the sake of having emotional intelligence. It's helping people understand what areas are you over functioning in that you ought to be delegating. What areas is your fear restricting you from scaling your business by hiring someone who can do exactly what you do so that it would free you up to be out there living in communication and marketing and expanding your business. These are the different things that emotional intelligence touches in the different spaces. Living in communication for the people who are there. This is, can you move people? Can you create buy-in? Because it's about having authority and leadership conversations and negotiation techniques. This is where communication grows and influence grows. And then, of course, when that's done exceptionally well, you're able to graduate into imagination. And to be in imagination, the question is, can you see what others cannot? This is the creation level. And this is the highest level. This is vision and innovation. Go ahead, Sean.
I was gonna say, in like, a good real life example of moving from communication into imagination is, read the biographies of Steve Jobs, of Elon Musk, um, read the biographies of the Rockefeller family, and you learn from them, and you'll see this same progression where, Elon Musk, I think he's a little more hands on than some, but he comes up with the idea, and he doesn't even use his own money. He goes and raises money based on the idea and the influence he has from other people,
Right.
and then it manifests itself into reality through systems and processes and communication. But same with Steve Jobs. He had a visionary idea, and it was that imaginative idea that it
Yeah.
wasn't his own resources. He sold the idea based on what he could imagine and brought it into fruition. Um, I think a good place to maybe land this plane tonight is what I see a lot of, especially since we, are still kind of starting out on this stage one, the fundamentals, is when people get overly consumed with implementation. I see a couple symptoms, three main symptoms. The first main symptom is they become blinded to where there's help. I can't tell you how many business owners I've run into that are too busy to have a 30-45 minute conversation on the business. They're so consumed working in the business that they have no capacity to move and transition into the next level. So that's symptom
Right.
number one, too busy.
They're becoming an employee inside of their own business.
Correct. The second symptom is they've spent so much time in implementation that they lack the not even just the time, they lack the creative muscle and the downtime, because it's scientifically proven creativity comes after boredom. So they're so consumed in the business, they're no longer creative. And what do I mean by that? You can easily sense it. The symptom is if you ask them about their business, all they can tell you are products and features and services.
Yep.
They're going to be unable to take a step outside the business to say, like, hey, Sean, what do you do? Hey, man, you know how like a lot of people have an account in one place, a financial product in another, maybe they have 2 or 3 bank accounts, nothing's organized, they think they have insurance but they can't remember, their spouse doesn't know where the policy is, they don't even know if they've updated their beneficiary since they've been married, everything's spread out and disorganized. Yeah, I help people put all that together, right? What you're going to hear is a lot of, well, um I cut lawns and I've been doing it for 30 years. Oh, and we just added a new service where now we're doing power washing. They speak to just extra services, product benefits. There's no creative um, marketing. There's no idea of the actual transformation that they're selling. They get stuck in just selling a product and a service, which there's nothing wrong with that. But the problem is now you have endless competition.
Right.
And the only way you can compete, if you can only communicate a benefit or a feature or a service, the only way you can compete nowadays is price. And then you're going to be undervaluing yourself.
Right.
And then the third symptom is they when you get stuck in implementation, you tend to forget who your audience is, who is your customer. So it's something that your mentor Myron has talked about a lot. If you've ever met people who get upset because like their business is their baby and they've been in it for so long, or they're so passionate about it, but
Uh-huh.
they create something that they value and not necessarily the marketplace values.
Absolutely.
And so there's nothing wrong with being a technician. It's just, since we're talking about the fundamentals and getting an idea before you jump in and take a risk, I'm all about taking risks. I think you are too, Mike. I'm all about growth, but we need to take strategic, wise, calculated risks.
Right.
And those are the 3 kind of traps of the technician implementation being just solely focused on the execution of the business. Is you get stuck in the business with no time to work on the business, which then creates stress. You don't give yourself enough downtime. You lack creativity in what your actual end result is, because what like, for example, in my industry, I don't sell like the means are products or whatever, but what I'm actually selling is a pathway to financial peace, right?
Right.
That's working on the business, seeing bigger picture. And then the third is I have to remember my audience. I have to remember who my customers are. And so, I'm really excited because one of the next videos I'm dropping is a real life case study It was based on an actual transaction that I worked on, one of my favorite transactions. It was $1 billion business, and it was built by a physician. And that's a big deal because it's a very hard industry, primary care physician, to build $1 billion business. But in that case study, you'll see he recognized early on, he was a visionary. He saw a trend before the market caught on, took a risk to build into that trend, to be a trend setter, took a wholly different approach. Like, instead of just opening up one new location and trying to be, one doctor and, just doing a physician group, he studied McDonald's. And so he used a franchise model. And then he built complementary businesses and service lines around the main business. And over
Very good.
30 years, it compounded into $1 billion exit. But it took all four levels of value, and it took him shifting his identity and learning how to operate, not just as a physician, a master technician, a master of his craft, but becoming the imaginative, visionary creator and giving up the control to get there.
Exactly. Exactly. That's exactly what I want to speak to, because one thing that is, and that is such a perfect segue, because people have to know, especially in business, that growth is not optional. Growth is not optional for the person called to greater responsibility. They have that free choice. It's not necessary. However, growth does demand something costly. And for that physician to be able to not only just be a physician, but to grow and expand his identity into creating $1 billion business ecosystem, it speaks so true and so loudly. And I just want to use that example, which is perfect for people to understand that the old version of you cannot accompany you in the next level.
Mm.
Like, the implementer version of you must die in order for the builder to emerge. Like, the controller, the person that feels like they have to control everything and do everything, that person must die in order for the unifier to rise. And then, even then, for the unifier, who may be the silent observer, if you're a silent observer and you're great at reading the room and working behind the scenes, well, the silent observer must die in order for the communicator to lead. So there's a level of growth from that silence to communication. And the limited thinker must die in order for the visionary to imagine. So what's true is every next level always asks for a funeral before it offers a promotion.
And I would say, from a financial perspective, where it does get hard, and I don't want to sugarcoat this, is typically each next level ask for an investment before you feel ready.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's so perfectly said, dude. So in everything that we're sharing, which is so true, I've experienced it, you've experienced it, and I'm still living it now. Like, so the real question is not can you grow? I think the question I believe we're asking is, what version of yourself are you willing to let go in order to become who your future requires? Because it will always cost you something. It'll always cost me something. And to get to the place of position that I am right now, and to be able to live from a position of clarity and abundance, and do the things that I get to do on the daily thing, like on the daily, it cost something in the beginning. And boy, was it stretching me at the time. Today, I am so grateful that I did it. And it's not stopping here, it's only growing into new levels. So, and that's why I say commitment tends to come before clarity. But if we're not afraid to commit to our future self, clarity will always show up.
Yep. Yep. Well, Mike, thank you so much, guys. Little bit over the hour. This has been a really awesome broadcast. Before you drop off, please hit the subscribe button. We're here every Monday at 8 o'clock, even on holidays. Mike, thanks again so much for jumping on. And if you haven't yet got to check it out, go to stage.seankshahkarami.com. That is going to give you the blueprint to transform what you're doing in your business, tell you exactly what stage you're in, give you the unlock to the next stage so you can get there more easily. Has my contact information there if you'd like to schedule a 10, 15-minute phone call to give you just a few minutes of my time, complimentary, to help you out. You can ask me any questions, available by email. Until next time, guys, and I'll drop the link when this posts. But until next week, have a great week. Hope you had an amazing weekend, and we'll see you then.
All right, we'll see you then. Bye bye.